When the bank clerk looked up at me, his voice faltered, just long enough for my heart to split open. "Mrs. Hale, your son was here last week. He tried to close your account. My name is Temperance Hale, and in that single sentence, I learned what betrayal truly costs. My son." Andrew, the boy I raised on truth and decency, had walked into this very bank and signed papers declaring me mentally unfit. He even forged my handwriting, the same hand that once wrote him lullabies. I didn't cry, I didn't argue, I just signed a different paper, one that would stop him from erasing me. Because in that moment, I understood something terrible and liberating all at once. He might carry my blood, but I am done letting him write my name. The bank smelled like paper and lemon cleaner. I arrived early, like always. The small ritual of signing things in person made the world feel a little more ordered. The counter was cool under my palms. The young man behind it smiled before he spoke, but his hands wouldn't stop fidgeting with the folder in front of him. "Before we go any further," he said, and his voice had that hesitant tilt people use when they're trying to cushion bad news. "Your son stopped by last week. He tried to shut down your account." For a beat, I simply looked at him. He waited, eyes apologetic, as if he could arrange the world back into place. He tapped a corner of the folder and lowered his voice. "He brought a power of attorney and a physician's note. It says you've been declared incapacitated." The words landed like small stones. I felt them in my chest more than in my ears, not disbelief so much as the odd, searing clarity that comes when something you trusted is suddenly called into question. I watched his fingers flip the pages, watched the official stamps and seals that make paper feel final. "He says you're under supervision," he added, "that you're in hospice." I let out a dry little laugh that tasted like metal. "My husband's been gone 10 years, I said. "He couldn't possibly have signed anything for me." He looked down at a signature and then back up, threading his fingers together. "It has his name on it," he admitted. "But the handwriting, it isn't the same." That was the part that made my lungs tighten. The signature, my late husband's name, written on a document that handed my life over to my son. A name I'd watched sign checks, letters, love notes. To see it used like a stamp that could make me vanish was a kind of theft I hadn't imagined could be so precise. I steadied myself against the counter. The world outside the bank was too bright, sunlight cutting across the glass, heat pooling on the sidewalk. Inside, the air felt thin. Behind the polite, nervous clerk, the folder seemed to throb with intent. Whoever had arranged this had thought of everything: papers, a note from a doctor, a signature that looked practiced. The only thing that stopped them was the human pause of someone who still cared how the truth looked. "Can this be undone?" I asked. My voice did not shake. That was another small ordinance I still commanded, a calm voice in a room full of paper that could decide the shape of the next years. "Yes," he said quickly, relief mingling with the professional habit of following procedure. "We can place a hold. We'll need your signature on a revocation to remove any access." I reached into my bag, found the pen I always carried, the old Parker my husband had loved, and took the paper. My hand trembled, not because I was old, but because it was the first time I saw in plain ink that the child I had sent into the world had planned a way to remove me from it. The pen tasted faintly of the years, of ink and evenings in a kitchen that no longer existed. I wrote my name, each letter a small reclamation. The signature was imperfect, a little unsteady at the end, but it was mine, and it landed on the line as if it belonged there. When I pocketed the folder the clerk handed back, the sunlight caught my scarf, and the harbor far off seemed to breathe. For the first time in a long time, A quiet certainty settled in my ribs. If he could forge my past, I thought as I stepped back into the street, then I would become something he could never pretend to own. I would make myself unforgettable. The drive home felt longer than it should have, the road curling beside the water like a thought I didn't want to finish. The house waited exactly as I'd left it, still dutiful, too clean. After 38 years, it had learned to hold its breath with me. Only the grandfather clock dared to speak, marking each second with a soft, relentless pulse. I set the kettle to boil and tried to steady my hands. The sound of water heating filled the silence where Graham's voice used to be. When the tea was ready, I carried the cup to the old oak cabinet where we kept every important paper, insurance policies, tax forms, letters that had once mattered. I wasn't sure what I was looking for until I found it, a folder I didn't remember seeing before. The first page read, Early Onset Alzheimer's, Temperance Hale. At the bottom, Dr. Russell Givens. I closed my eyes for a moment. Russell had been Andrew's mentor years ago, a young doctor I'd once invited to dinner, a boy who painted sunsets in my art class when he couldn't afford supplies. The document was neat, stamped, dated, perfectly formatted, so perfect it couldn't possibly be real. I turned on my laptop and typed in the medical record number printed on the page. No results found. I scrolled through old emails, my stomach tightening. Then I searched my inbox for Andrew Hale. A chain appeared, messages I'd forgotten, or maybe ignored. One caught my eye. Please update beneficiary info under case 54HAZ. Mom's entering assisted care next month. Next month. He'd already scheduled the end of me. I sat back, laughed once, soft, bitter. At the bottom of the cabinet, I found another file, a fax from 2015, warning Dr. Andrew Hale for unauthorized signatures. So he'd practiced long before this, testing how close he could get to the line between love and convenience. I had missed every sign, or maybe I had chosen not to see them. Denial is quieter than truth. It hums instead of screams. In the insurance binder labeled Graham Hale, Life Policy, another shock waited. The secondary beneficiary wasn't me anymore. The name typed neatly beside the line was Marissa Hale, my daughter-in-law, the woman who never bothered to hide her impatience when I spoke too slowly at dinner. I whispered into the empty room, the tea long gone cold. He's not just erasing me, he's replacing me. The grandfather clock answered with its steady tick, as if to say time itself was keeping score. The next morning, I drove to the edge of town where Elaine Bradford kept her tiny office. The paint on the sign had peeled, but the door still creaked the same way it had when she was practicing law full-time. Inside smelled of paper and rain. Elaine looked up, startled, then lowered her gaze. Temperance. Andrew came by last month, she said quietly. He told me you'd asked him to collect your will before moving into assisted living. I waited. The air between us felt heavy with things unsaid. He had a letter, she added. Your handwriting. I believed him. I took out my phone, opened a photo of my real signature, and set it beside the one she'd kept. She studied them, her lips pressed tight. Guilt moved across her face like a shadow. I'm sorry, she said at last. I should have called you. You should have remembered who taught you to read faces in court, I said softly. She turned to the filing cabinet, pulled out a folder, and laid it on the desk. He wanted this. I didn't give it. My original will. Untouched. I sank into the chair across from her. She spoke again, voice steadier now. If you want to fight him, I'll help. But you'll need proof and a reason to keep going. I met her eyes. He just gave me both. Elaine hesitated, then leaned closer. There's something else you should know. Graham had a separate savings account, opened before Andrew went to med school. Andrew never knew it existed. That caught me. I hadn't thought about that account in years. Elaine continued, "Your son requested that the Hale family estate be converted into joint ownership between him and Marissa. If the paperwork goes through, they'll have legal control over everything." Rain started against the windows, slow and insistent. Charleston rain always lingered, refusing to leave until it had said what it came to say. I thanked Elaine, gathered the files, and walked out into the gray afternoon. Halfway home, I pulled over by the river. The water was high and restless. I took out my notebook, the one Graham had given me the year we married, and wrote a single line across the page. He forged my signature once. He won't get to write my ending. Charleston in mid-April always smells like salt and damp air. Beautiful, if you're not already choking on something unsaid. Andrew called that morning. His voice dipped in warmth, polished smooth like a rehearsed apology. "Mom, we haven't had dinner in weeks. Come over Saturday. Marissa's making your favorite lemon chicken." I said yes, part curiosity, part strategy. I needed to see what they'd built in the dark. Mount Pleasant was glowing when I arrived, lawns trimmed within an inch of their lives, porch lights burning like they'd been staged for a magazine. The house itself looked too perfect, but the air was cold. Marissa opened the door, smile taut enough to crack porcelain. "So glad you could make it. Mom Hale?" That pause between the two words cut deeper than any insult. Mom Hale. 2 syllables of distance dressed up as respect. The dining table was immaculate, white napkins folded like origami, food that smelled of lemon and pretense. I sat where she pointed. Andrew poured wine with the calm precision of someone presenting evidence. "Mom," he began, "you've seemed overwhelmed lately. We found a wonderful facility, St. James Care. They specialize in cognitive treatment." I lifted my glass, studied the liquid light inside it. "I see," I said. "How much does it cost these days to get rid of your own mother?" The sentence landed like glass breaking. Marissa flinched but recovered quickly, her voice hushed and silky. "You'll love it there. They have art therapy." "I taught art for 30 years. Dear," I said evenly, "I don't need therapy to remember colors." Andrew's jaw tightened. He switched to that professional tone he uses with patients, a mixture of condescension and pity. While he spoke, my eyes wandered the room, the new furniture, the sterile perfection, and stopped on a folder sitting neatly on a shelf. Hale Family Estate Transfer. I reached for another slice of chicken and smiled. "I suppose you'll handle my mail once I'm gone?" Andrew gave a short, brittle laugh. "We're just helping." "Mom." I stood, placed a gentle hand on his shoulder, leaned close enough that only he could hear. "Then, let me help you too, darling. Next time you forge my name, spell it right." The room froze. Marissa's breath hitched, a small panicked sound that didn't belong in polite company. I picked up my purse and headed for the door. The silence behind me was heavy enough to feel on my back. In the garage, the fluorescent light hummed above a table stacked with papers. One caught my eye, Moving Services, scheduled for May 5th, Graham's birthday. They'd already planned the day they'd erase me from the house he built, from the life I kept breathing for. I stepped into the damp Charleston air and let it fill my lungs. It didn't smell of salt anymore. It smelled like resolve. The rain started before I reached home, a soft drumming that grew louder the closer I came to the river. The house glowed against the storm, lamps I'd left on waiting like faithful witnesses. Inside, the quiet pressed against my ribs. I brewed a pot of black tea, opened the desk drawer, and found it where I always kept it, the old Parker pen, Graham's handwriting engraved along the barrel, for signing what truly matters. I dialed Elaine. I'm done reacting, I told her. It's time to sign something that matters. She arrived with a leather folder and the steady energy of someone who's seen enough battles to know where the line should be drawn. We spread papers across my kitchen table, the thunder outside echoing our determination. Together we drafted new documents: freeze every account under my name, transfer assets into a temporary trust Elaine would oversee, appoint a single contingent beneficiary, Lila Hale. Elaine frowned, adjusting her glasses. You're sure? She's just a kid. No, I said, signing the first page. She's twice the man her father ever was. Later that evening, Lila showed up soaked from the rain, her hair plastered to her forehead. She looked both furious and scared. Grandma, Dad's been acting weird. He called our landlord asking for my address. I set my cup down carefully. He's not checking on you, honey. He's checking to see if I've given you anything. She sat across from me, eyes wide. I told her everything. Every forged document, every lie dressed as concern. When I finished, she whispered, If you do this, he'll hate you. No, I said. He'll blame you. Hate takes effort. Your father's too lazy for that. Lila laughed through her tears, and for a moment, the kitchen didn't feel haunted. I reached for Graham's pen again. The ink flowed smoothly as I signed the final line. For signing what truly matters, I murmured. Wind rattled the windows. In the reflection of the glass, I caught my own face, lined, tired, but unflinching. Not a frail woman waiting to be erased, but someone preparing to reclaim the authorship of her life. Outside, the storm gathered its strength. Inside, I finally had mine. The storm warnings had been circling Charleston for days. Wind strong enough to break shutters, rain hard enough to erase the roads. I had just poured tea and shut the last window when the knocking began. 3 slow, deliberate knocks. I didn't need to look. I knew that rhythm. Andrew stood on the porch, expensive raincoat dripping onto the mat, his face drawn but his eyes still sharp with control. Beside him, Marissa clutched a plastic folder like it was a shield. A man in a white coat lingered behind them, smiling with professional ease. Dr. Miller, he introduced himself. We're just here for a brief mental health evaluation. Mrs. Hale. Mom, it's just a routine check. Andrew added in that syrupy tone he once used to charm his father out of anger. You need to sign this consent form so we can get you the care you deserve. I motioned them inside. The house felt smaller with the storm pressing against the windows, the wind scraping at the edges of the world. I sat at the table, the teapot steaming gently between us. My hands trembled, just enough to sell the part. Read it to me, dear, I said softly. My eyes aren't what they used to be. Andrew smiled as though victory were inevitable. He began reading aloud, voice smooth and confident. Transfer of remaining funds, authorizing continuous care, allowing medical proxy. Each phrase was a nail closing the lid on the life he wanted to bury me in. I nodded, slow, deliberate, keeping my expression blank. When he reached the final clause, I touched the edge of the table and pressed the small recorder I'd hidden beneath my teacup. His voice filled the room, clear, precise, self-incriminating. And we'll manage all her financial decisions from now on. The rain outside slammed against the house in answer. I lifted my cup and smiled. That's a beautiful speech, son, I said quietly. You always were good at reciting things you didn't mean. The air snapped. Marissa's knuckles whitened around the folder. Dr. Miller shifted backward, his fake composure cracking. You don't understand. Mom, Andrew said sharply. No, I replied. For the first time, I do. I folded the document, slid it into an envelope already marked with Elaine's name, and sealed it with one deliberate press. "This storm will pass," I told him, my voice even. "But I doubt you'll like what comes after." They left without another word, the door slamming behind them. Wind howled against the porch, rain exploding across the windows. I pulled out my phone, attached the recording, and sent it to Elaine with 3 words. He confessed. On tape. The thunder rolled. I poured another cup of tea, let the warmth steady me, and listened to the recording again. The words transfer of funds echoing between the cracks of thunder, a reminder that justice doesn't always shout. Sometimes it just remembers. 2 days later, the city was quiet again. The hurricane had passed, leaving Charleston buried under fallen leaves and broken branches. The kind of silence that follows destruction, the heavy kind that waits for you to breathe first. I was sorting papers when the mail arrived. A thick envelope, no return address. The handwriting stopped my heart for half a beat. Andrew's, the same loops and slants I'd once taught him as a boy. I brewed tea before opening it. The smell of bergamot steadied me. "Mom," the letter began, "I think there's been a misunderstanding. I only did what I did to protect you. You're getting older. I just wanted to make sure things were in order. Please don't involve lawyers. This will ruin everything we've built as a family." 3 pages of practiced remorse, the kind of apology written for himself, not for me. Words dipped in affection but dripping with fear. I could almost hear his voice, soft, pleading, manipulation disguised as care. When I finished reading, I tore the pages into 8 neat pieces. "My dignity was never yours to negotiate," I whispered. I took a blank sheet from my desk and wrote 1 line in return. He forged my signature once. He won't forge my silence twice. That evening, Elaine called. Her voice carried the satisfaction of a storm finally breaking. "The state's fraud department has the recording," she said. "They're opening a case." As if on cue, my phone buzzed again. "Lila, Dad's furious. Grandma. He's saying you're confused, that I'm being manipulated. He's calling people at church." "Let him," I said, stirring my tea. "He's teaching them what guilt sounds like." The rain had returned by nightfall, softer now, brushing against the windows like an afterthought. I sat in the living room, opened the newspaper left on the doorstep. On page 3, buried between city updates and charity events, was a single line. "Local doctor under investigation for financial misconduct. Dr. Andrew Hale." I folded the paper carefully and leaned back. The house creaked as the wind shifted. It wasn't joy that filled me, only the lightness of release, the quiet satisfaction of knowing I no longer had to prove what was true. Justice, I thought, doesn't sound like thunder. It sounds like peace. I never imagined I'd sit in a courtroom facing the boy I once carried in my arms. Life has a cruel way of dragging buried truths into the light. The hearing room in the Charleston County Courthouse gleamed sterile and white, cold enough to make the air itself feel judgmental. I sat beside Elaine, her presence steady as stone, while Andrew and Marissa sat across the aisle, 2 figures carved from pride and denial. Between them, his attorney spoke with the confidence of a man paid to twist sympathy into strategy. My client acted solely out of concern and medical necessity, the lawyer said. There was no malicious intent. I didn't answer. I didn't need to. The truth was already waiting on the table, a small USB drive, almost ordinary, except for the storm it held inside. Elaine connected her laptop to the speaker and pressed play. Andrew's voice filled the courtroom, calm, clinical, unmistakable. "And will manage all her financial decisions from now on." The sound cracked through the silence like thunder. His lawyer flinched, ready to object, but the judge raised a hand. Let it play. Then came my voice, soft and precise, from that night of rain. That's a beautiful speech. Son. When the recording ended, no one spoke. Andrew's throat moved as he swallowed hard. His hands clenched the sides of his chair as though he could hold on to whatever illusion of control he had left. The judge turned toward me. Mrs. Hale, do you wish to press criminal charges? I met his gaze, calm and unshaken. No, I said. I just want my name back. Elaine's hand found mine beneath the table, a quiet affirmation that this was enough. The gavel came down with a single, decisive strike. The court hereby revokes all powers of attorney held by Dr. Andrew Hale. The matter will be referred to the State Fraud Department for investigation. The flash of cameras followed as I stood. Reporters whispered, pens ready. Behind me, Marissa's voice carried faintly. She was right. It wasn't loud, but it was enough. Andrew froze, eyes empty, no rage left, just the hollow understanding of a man watching his own story collapse. As I passed him, I paused, close enough for only him to hear. You taught me to sign your school forms when you were 10, I whispered. Today, I'm just signing the end of this story. And then I walked out. The courtroom door closed softly behind me, light as the final signature on a life I'd finally reclaimed. A month had passed since the hearing, but the echoes of that day still hummed quietly through Charleston. The headlines found me before I went looking for them. On the front page of the Charleston Daily was a photo of me sitting on my porch, teacup in hand, sunlight spilling across the table. Above it, the words stretched bold and merciless. Retired teacher exposes elder financial abuse by her own son. I didn't read the article. I had already lived every sentence of it. Still, that picture made me smile. The light caught just right, soft enough to make me look untouched by it all. Lies couldn't survive daylight forever. That afternoon, I met Elaine at her office. The air smelled of paper and lemon polish again, the scent of closure. She laid the final document on the desk and handed me Graham's old pen. I read the title slowly, Hale Maritime Trust, a scholarship fund in my husband's name. This is for students who build ships, I told her, signing my name. Not sink families. Elaine laughed under her breath, the sound of friendship stitched with pride. Beneath the signature line, she had written the fund's inscription, for those who were told they were too old to remember, yet remembered enough to protect what mattered. Outside, the river shimmered gold in the afternoon sun, as if Graham himself approved from somewhere unseen. Later that day, Lila arrived with the folded newspaper tucked under her arm and a bundle of lavender tied in twine. "Grandma," she said, her voice trembling, "you didn't just save yourself, you saved us both." I brushed a strand of hair from her face and smiled. "No, sweetheart. You saved what truth looks like in this family." Her eyes filled, and I saw in them the kind of strength that doesn't come from fighting, but from knowing when to stop. That evening, my inbox pinged with a single unread message. From Andrew Hale. Subject, none. I'm sorry. For everything. I stared at the words for a long while. They didn't sting the way they once would have. They simply sat there, hollow and weightless. I saved the email, then deleted it. The next morning, Elaine called. "Any regrets?" she asked. I took my tea to the window where the sun was sinking into the water, the sky burning in shades of red and gold. "No," I said quietly. "Sometimes justice is knowing they have to live with themselves." The reflection of the river shimmered against the glass, ripples catching the last light. I sipped my tea and let the warmth settle deep into me. Justice, I realized, wasn't punishment or applause. It was peace. The kind that doesn't need to be announced, only earned. The morning was quiet, the kind that feels freshly washed after a storm. Charleston shone clean beneath a sky of clear blue. I wore my Navy sweater and walked to Seymour Federal Bank, the place where it had all begun. Michael, the young clerk, looked up and smiled. "Good morning, Mrs. Hale. Do you need any help today?" "No, dear," I said, returning the smile. "I just came to make sure my signature still means something." He chuckled softly, though his eyes glistened. I filled out a withdrawal slip for $50, enough to buy flowers for Lila. My handwriting wavered slightly, but the line held steady and true. When I finished, the sunlight poured through the glass, touching my silver hair. The breeze from the river carried the scent of salt and peace. I thought of Graham and of the woman I'd once been, the one who trembled before every signature. In my notebook, I wrote, "You don't owe anyone your silence. You don't owe anyone forgiveness that costs your peace." I closed it gently. The cover read, "Temperance Hale, owner, author, witness." For the first time in years, every breath felt deliberate. There was nothing left to lose, because at last, I had reclaimed what mattered most, myself.